So, hello and welcome back to the Improvement Season podcast. This time, no, it's always like that. It's Pascal Floor, and on the other end, it is Steve Hall. So, hey, Steve, how are you doing?
Hi there. Hope you're well. Sorry, I was Pascal just introduced it like he would introduce his check-ins, and I was just thinking, what do I always do when I have check-ins? And sometimes I do it when I leave you a voice note. I'm like, "Hi, Pascal. Hope you're well. Let's look over your notes." I'm like, "Hey, Pascal, I guess you kind of did check in with me just now." But yeah, it's funny. I was just telling Pascal off air actually. So I think everyone has it where they just have that time where they're just like, what the hell am I doing? Like, what is life? Why do I don't know, whatever it might be. It might be a job, it might be bodybuilding, it might be, I don't know, a relationship, whatever it might be. And for me, it was just kind of, you just feel like you're treading water a little bit. You're like, oh, what? Like, where's my drive again? What? I don't know. You kind of feel like you need, I think it's easy to rate it to like fitness goals. It's like, especially in an off season, you can just get like, oh, what am I doing? It's like, it's easy when you've got like, I don't know, a bodybuilding show at the end. You're like, fuck, that's what I'm doing. Like, I have that end goal. It's like clear. And luckily, I think the same goes for you, Pascal, and probably loads of the listeners. We're good enough with our routines where it's like, it doesn't matter. I'm going to get it done. But just as an example, yesterday, I was a bit behind with work, and that kind of stressed me out a little bit. And then everything got pushed back, and that always stresses me out a bit because it's like, oh, my sleep, blah, blah, blah. I want time to relax before bed, whatever it is. And I was just putting off my PM session. I was just like, it got to 3 and I was like, no way. I ate my like last meal at 2, and then I was like 4, and I was like, man, I really should be doing it now. And then it was like 4:30, and I was like, man, I don't want to do this. I'm doing it now. And I just did it. And Charlotte was like, because I told her I just couldn't be bothered to do it. And she was like, so was it good? And I was like, I mean, it was good. I did what I needed to do. I didn't need to be in like a spectacular, really super motivated, driven state to have a good session. I think it's good for people to hear that like everyone goes through that sort of thing. So yeah, I think probably like it's obvious why this sort of thing happens, but like everyone's probably going through it a little bit with everything that's going on in the world. And I have a solution because I will be starting prep, which I'm kind of nervous for, to be honest. I don't know why. Again, I was talking to Pascal about it. Can't really explain why I'm nervous for that. But that's meant to start in like a few weeks' time. The gyms will be opening soon anyway, so that'll give me a bit of a boost. And then I have a holiday, a week away booked in to go hiking like I did last year as things are opening up in the UK and we're allowed to, be a bit more normal. It sounds really weird, like the government do control you, I guess, but I'm allowed to go and hike whereas with a friend, whereas I guess I wasn't really allowed to do that previously. So yeah, I have a little holiday kind of booked in. So that'll be nice just to, get away from everything a little bit.
I know this sounds wrong, Steve, but I'm actually quite happy to hear that coming from you. And I think the listeners will appreciate that as well, because most of the time it is me who's talking about those kind of things.
Right.
And it can easily appear as if I'm always the one who's just like struggling or having those kind of issues. And Steve is always then the perfect guy who's just like sticking to everything, right? And that you're just saying like you have somewhat of a blues as well, where you just like lack the drive at times as well, is kind of refreshing, I think.
Yeah. I think part of it, I was saying to Charlotte, like one thing that would really help me right now is if I just didn't need to eat so much. It's a burden. Like, I guess you probably haven't I don't know if you've been there before, Pascal, but where you're just like, I just don't want to eat this meal. And actually it's going to make me feel a bit more lethargic and a bit less productive. Like every morning for breakfast, and I'm like, I need to eat like my breakfast and get that in and get a decent amount of calories in. Otherwise the rest of the day is going to be torture. And I'm like, but I'm just like really in the zone with like check-ins. And I just want to get them done. And I'm like, but I can't like eat 4 hours later. That's really going to start like kicking my whole day off. So I think dieting, at least, and I've spoken about it before, like that diet honeymoon period, I can't wait for like the first. I'll probably complain in a like week of dieting, like I'm hungry now, fuck this. But yeah, I am looking forward to just, I don't know, not having to just pile away. It's like a job, piling away the food at times.
It's interesting because one of my athletes this week, who's prepping this year as well, has just notified me about some federations and some shows already now announcing that they are postponing their first shows on the finals. And this is exactly what we've talked about last week, right? Where it's like everything is still so uncertain, at least, especially here in Europe, which I still. So to me, UK is still kind of part of Europe, even though that
EU, I see it the same,
right? But still, when I'm then saying like in Europe, I'm also referring to the entire situation that is going on, and UK is very, very good at vaccinating a lot of people, but right now, just like the entire thing is spreading once again and jumping upwards once again in regards to the incidence cases, and because of that, there's a huge uncertainty of what is going to happen here next. I was talking about it like last week, and here this week in particularly, I don't think that with everything that is going on, the gyms will reopen, at least in Germany, in the next 2 months. And I would have never thought that this is something that I'm going to say after 5 months of a lockdown. And because of that, I think also some other federations are picking that one up. And because of that, they are already preparing for that. Because I think that they need to pre-plan things. And especially such bigger events are harder to plan. We know that from planning something like the seminar. And it's super stressful to then cancel it after all when you've already put in so much work and effort. And he just sent it over to me that the PNBA and the INBA, they've already announced that they are going to postpone shows and postpone the finals and perhaps even cancel them. And I don't think that they will be the last ones who are going to do that. And that is exactly the concern and one of the reasons why or at least for me, why I've been kind of, this is the reason why I didn't compete like last year. I started the prep in December and then ended the prep in March because that kind of expectation that many shows are going to be canceled, which then in return turned out the way that we predicted it to be. Some shows still took place, but I think for me at least it wasn't worth it for only 1 or 2 shows to then go through a contest prep. And now it's the same thing, and it seems like it's going to turn out the same way once again. And that's why, of course, due to that massive uncertainty, it's like, do I really want to do it, right? Or do I really want to do it? And I think that there's also something, I don't know if you've heard about it, but this is just something that I wanted to let you know because it's exactly what it is that we've been talking about last episode.
I didn't know that some federations had started cancelling over in Europe. It's actually, there's so many federations across the world. I'm good with like the UK, like BNBF, UKDFBA, I can kind of get to grips with those. Yeah. And then obviously there's like the PCA, there's the Two Bros Pros, and some of them are now getting natural divisions as well. So some of our clients could look at those. But yeah, then Europe. But I wanted to, and I don't think I necessarily brought this up when I last thought about it, but I wanted to compete like with you. And obviously Jess is also looking to compete this season as well. And I wanted to do some shows like in Europe. We wanted to like document that. And like, it would be, and that's I know it sounds probably funny to people, but that's like a big thing from an enjoyment perspective to be able to do that with you. And then also it's like a business thing, like it'll just make the whole thing more worthwhile. Like it's a big undertaking, but if you can make it work from a like competitive point of view, you want to do it. From a like enjoyment point of view, like you're doing it and other people would be doing it, and kind of make it a little bit more fun and interactive, and then make it work from a business perspective as well. It's like, well, fuck yeah, of course I'm going to compete. But when all of like certain things get removed, it makes it a little bit more challenging, and it's not just a simple case of like, oh yeah, just die down, and if the shows are there, then I'll do the shows that are available. It's like, well, I quite like to do, especially as you get more experienced, or not even that, but to do several shows, it's such a waste to do like one show. At least in my opinion, you'd never want to just do one and then call it quits. You've kind of spent months and months and months.
Yeah, unless you're highly advanced already, you have done several different seasons or so, and now it's just about maybe competing in the pro ranks or so, right? Maybe something like that. We like just know that you're not pre-qualified. Exactly, where you just know that you don't benefit from actually going to some kind of qualifiers or so, because you know that you will destroy everyone, right? Which is not the case for us.
So, yeah, I mean, Yeah, it's hard because even for the UK DFBA, I know they really consolidated the number of shows. I think they've maybe got 3 or 4 qualifiers. They normally have like at least like 6, and they would start in May, so they'd be coming really soon. And they've all been pushed to like August, September, and then the finals are like October, I think. So you hope by then, especially in the UK, it'll be all right. But
so for me personally,
can international competitors come?
Yeah, exactly. This is exactly what I wanted to bring up now. I think that UK will be in a good spot, very likely, right? But what about international competitors? Also for us, because we are still planning and doing the planned seminar 2020. And right now we have to slowly consider of like, okay, are we even able to do it here in 2021, like later in 2021? And that is, of course, only possible if international travelers can get into the UK without any kind of issues, where they don't need to quarantine themselves for like 2 weeks before then participating at the seminar, which would have been the case for Christopher, for example, with the last UK DFBA. He could have competed there, but he would have needed to actually travel there 2 weeks in advance and then compete. This is, of course, super expensive for the majority of people, and that's why, of course, it's not even feasible. And that then raises the question of like, okay, UK DFBA, BNBF, all these kind of things would probably go down, I would very much assume, but it will probably not go down with those international athletes. And then the other question will be WNBF. Probably going to happen somewhere in the US. But will it just be accessible to US natural athletes and UK natural athletes, and other people from other parts of the world can't participate? Right? It's just, once again, people pick it up as complaining or so, or us talking constantly about the current situation. But I think that the current situation is omnipresent. It ties into every single aspect of our lives, right? So it's very, very hard to avoid not talking about it, even if we're just talking about home training. It's kind of because of that, right? And of course, this tying into several different aspects of our business, but also in our own personal lives and personal endeavors.
Yeah, and it's even, I think a lot of competitors, ourselves included, like they want to like travel. And they couldn't do travel and holidays. And like, as a bodybuilder, when you compete, that's like a good 6 months of your life for a lot of people where you're not traveling, you're not doing lots of socializing, and all these events are going to start building up. And it's like, well, I can't like turn down loads of things because people will expect it almost of you, and can I be so selfish to turn all these things down because I'm like, no, I got this show, and can I balance that along with all the changes that are just happening? Yeah, it's just that, like you said, it's the uncertainty, and it is a little stressful to just consider. The good news is, I guess, is the common thing we would always say, and what we probably said last year around this sort of time, is like the stage is always there. So if you can't compete 2021, not the end of the world, there's 2022. But then I guess it's the same thing, I guess, for all of us. And like maybe again, 2022, now you can travel, now you can go on holiday. Now life is a bit more fun, and maybe now isn't the time you want to compete because you've saved up all this like energy to need to go and like travel or socialize, whatever, and you need to indulge then. So maybe at 2023, and it's like now you're like 3 years, down the line.
This is basically what also came into your mind, right? That you want to also enjoy social events after the entire thing is kind of over. And that right now, with the anticipation that things are getting especially better in the UK, of course, this would massively interfere with everything, or those both things would interfere with another and kind of contradict another.
Yeah, it's just not easy when you're like, you can do it, and we've done it. You can be kind of social, but you're always thinking about, I need to get to bed because really will impact my training because I'm in a calorie deficit, or like I don't want to have this drink. It's not can't, but I really shouldn't. And it just isn't easy. And I'm not the most social guy. I'll put that out there first of all. But like, even for me, it's getting to the point where I'm like, I just want to see some people and do some stuff, go to cinema, enjoy some meals out with people, whatever it might be. So yeah, I'm still planning at the moment to compete this season. It doesn't change anything in the short term.
No.
I guess, yeah, it's just something to consider. And I think some people don't think about all the details, but especially once you've done it and like competed, I know how much it can take away. And once you've like, even for yourself, you've tried and you have dieted for a long period of time, you've got very close, you know how all encompassing it can be. And when there's a lot of other stressful things going on in the world, it will make the whole thing more challenging. So I feel for the people that competed in 2020, because that must have been tough for large portions of the year.
Especially those who competed, pushed through, were still anticipating and expecting to step on stage, and then 1 to 2 days before the show got cancelled. I can't even imagine how devastating that must be, to be honest.
Yeah.
Especially for first-time competitors.
I still feel for... Yeah, you remember Elias?
Yeah.
He maybe listened to the show. It's just like... He took it really well. He was very mature about it, but like he was his first... Like he built this first time competing in his head. We planned like a whole off-season. We led into the show. He was in like pristine condition for it. And yeah, it was like a week before, a few days before or something, it just got cancelled. It's just like, man, what can you do? Photo shoot, great. Not quite the same.
No, absolutely.
But Sweden, which is where he's from, maybe they're the ones. I don't actually know what's happening in Sweden, but they never had any lockdowns or anything, did they? Really?
To be honest, I haven't heard anything from them anymore. And it was in the news. I do remember the first lockdown when everyone was just talking about Sweden, how awful it is, what it is that they are doing, how can they, and all that kind of stuff. And now you don't hear anything from them anymore. Right? maybe it worked out, and they just don't want to put it out there, and right, so that people are not just like, I don't know, rioting and saying like, we need to be like Sweden. Don't know.
I know life over there is a little bit different, like compared to like somewhere like Italy, where people are on top of each other and families live together. I think Sweden's very much like a bit more spacious and stuff. So anyway, we won't get all into those things. How I know. We were talking again via WhatsApp, and you were kind of, obviously you weren't feeling great for a while. And I was like, mate, you'll feel so much better once you get bits of equipment and set yourself up and stuff. And over the last weekend and for the past few days, you have a significant improvement in what your setup is like at home.
Yeah. Right? So I was just like thinking, okay, I can't see the gyms reopening anytime soon, as I already talked about earlier on. And I really don't want to train the way that I did here for the next 2, 3, 4 months. I don't even know for how long this will last here, right? And that's why I said, okay, I need to do something. So I looked into purchasing some multi-gyms, so like proper setups. Thing is, though, that first and foremost, I didn't want to spend like 2,000, 3,000 euros on something like that, which I could have easily done to get a proper setup. But it then would have brought up another question, and that is, what should I do with it once the gyms reopen, and once, because we don't have too much space here, or at least not plenty of space that allows me to keep it in the future, especially when the kids grow up, they need to have their own room. And then we don't have space for then that multi-gym. That would have raised the question of like, okay, is it now a smart idea to get a multi-gym station that is 2,000 to 3,000 euros, and that only to then sell it again at some point for probably a much lower price, because people don't need it then that much anymore. And we all know, well, at least everyone who looked into gym equipment at the moment, that it's probably priced 10 to 20% more than it's usually priced. So you would have paid kind of a premium on top of that. So I thought like, no, this is not what I'm going to pay for that. So let me just sit down and modify the rack that I've built for myself, and modify it to an extent that it's more durable, and where I can then do a couple of other things. Maybe do like a belt squat attachment. So I did a little bit of construction work at home, modified the rack, Now I purchased a new bench for myself as well, where there's a leg extensions and a leg curl attachment added or on it as well. Not the greatest range of motion. I have to play a little bit around with it to see how I can get the greatest range of motion out of it. They could have easily done something with the bench so that you get the greatest range of motion. So it's probably because I bought probably the cheapest of the benches.
You can spend a lot on a bench.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was already 250 or so. But because of that, I think that they didn't go that much, I don't know, thought into the engineering aspect of the bench, because they could have easily worked around it just with a small modification in order to get a great range of motion and for the leg extension and leg rest. But anyway, got a new bench. Also, I've ordered myself a pulley system. I was considering at first building my own pulley system, but I thought like the time and investment for planning would have been just not worth it in comparison to how much a normal pulley system costs. Something like yours, just without any kind of legs. So I have to screw it into the wall. However, I will not screw it into the wall. I would screw it onto my rack, because now it's made for that. So this will then be on the side of the rack, so that I have a pulley system which will arrive in just a couple of days. And then basically I'm very well set up. Then I can do belt squats comfortably now with that new setup. It's not going to be a hassle. This is actually a very, very cool setup. Also, I can do leg extensions and leg curls. So I'm not just like limited to split squats, which at some point is just like, oh, don't know, I can't see them. And also now I'm finally able to do bench presses again, dumbbell presses, and I'm not just in need of doing or falling back to something like push-ups. And now with the pulley station then as well, I can do lat pull downs, and I can do all sorts of variations. You know it best. With just one cable tower, you can do a shit ton. And because my the belt squat system that I've built, and I have now a bench that I can turn into an incline bench, I think, and this is something that I have to figure out, I think that I can do chest supported rows like a chest supported row machine. This is something that I have to figure out, but on that pulley system, there is kind of a lat pull down, kind of that longer with grip handle, and that is something that I could probably attach to that belt squat machine, and it should work out. But this is something that I have to figure out when the time comes. But that would be amazing to then have like your own chest supported row machine at home as well. So that's the situation right now. Lots of things to talk about, I think.
Hi guys, Steve here. Just wanted to take a moment of your time to remind you of the Revive Stronger member site. Inside you'll find a thriving forum, a growing exercise library, presentations, research reviews, and courses. If you want to get involved, sign up via the description.
Just because you brought up like you built your own sort of kind of belt squat off the side of your rack, which I think there's a company that does something like that, where they can build a custom one to your rack. They reached out to me when they saw I was doing this
really?
one, and I was like, I don't think you could build that on my rack. Like my rack's not built for that sort of stuff. Anyway, did you see someone? I wish I could remember his name because I can't, but I apologize. Some of the listeners might have seen. He built a pendulum squat, like a full legit pendulum squat. Wow. And actually, I think maybe one of AJ Morris's clients built her own pendulum squat as well in like her basement. Because I think I saw that on his story one time, and I was like, fucking hell, these people.
To be honest,
that's amazing.
I think that I could pull that one off as well.
That's crazy.
I don't think that it's too hard, to be honest.
I'd worry about like the foundations of the building, like taking the...
Yeah, no, I think that should be easily doable. Maybe I will do that as well myself. That should... I mean, I even considered, because... Sorry now to deviate from what it is that you said. We can fall back to that one just a couple of seconds. The belt squat attachment that I've built, I considered replicating this one, then attaching like two handles on both sides, and then I could actually turn this into also like an incline and also just like a normal chest press machine. Yeah. And this is something that I'm right now also considering. So there are many, many ways that you can turn that into a crazy, crazy machine. It would be lovely though, and I was just like, while I was building everything, to be able to wield your own kind of iron stuff and so. But there's something that I can't. So everything needs to be out of wooden material at the moment. But it works. It works. But yeah, pendulum squat is, of course, a crazy thing that I didn't even think about. But this is something that maybe I should consider, because I was seeing also over on Pinterest that someone has built his own leg press machine out of wood. And I was just like, holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, if you have, I don't know, if you have a garden, you have lots of wood and equipment, you're pretty good with it, I can see why you could do all of these things. Absolutely. Yeah. So your top, I had in my head that the floor you're on now wasn't that big and spacious, but considering you have basically a full, like a power rack basically in there, it actually must be pretty big up there, which is really cool.
I mean, it fits perfect. So I changed places now. Because it didn't make sense to keep it where it was before. That was just like temporary. Now we moved it into the corner where I had my office before I switched places, and that perfectly fit in there. And yeah, it's now my workout area kind of. So yeah.
But I guess the good thing with wood is, I mean, it's not something you'll have invested tons of money to build it, so you can just take it down and recycle it or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And and that's the plan. Once the gyms are reopening, that I can just like break it down again and just like store it somewhere, without it being, I don't know, taking up too much space or being too complicated to break down. And that was the plan behind it. And also the price that I invested into that. So the entire rack may come out at around, I don't know, 200 now or so. But I mean, just consider this, and that is without the bench and without the pulley system. That on top of it all, maybe I spent like 600 then also. But yeah, that was kind of built over time, and I could always,
doesn't it?
Yeah, and I could
easily.
The thing is, I can always add something to that rack now. Just the thing that we've now talked about the pendulum. I never thought about that, or my consideration of actually then modifying the belt squat attachment, replicating that, or doing a second one out of that, and then I could easily turn it into like machine pressing movements as well. So at least incline, horizontal pressing and vertical pressing assisted movement as well. And perhaps now that I'm thinking about it, this is even something when I actually put kind of a bar in between those, I could even turn this into somewhat of like a pendulum squat already, which is not exactly the same, but kind of assisted as well. Don't know.
You're building your own, what's that machine called again? I always forget, like the TX thingy.
The Tyrex?
The Tyrex, that's the one. You're building your own one of those.
Man, I was even looking into their cheapest version of what it has, but it's also still coming at a price of like 4,000. I was just like, no.
Yeah, it's if I had a garage, I definitely would have invested in like a leg press, come hack squat thing. But yeah, you just imagine if I got one of those up in this flat. It's just, I'm pretty sure I would breach the safety limit of the weight that I'm allowed. I'm pretty sure I'm a little bit sketchy on that anyway.
But it's like you said, if I had like plenty of space at home, like a garage I can just like use, or maybe even a basement where it's just like, hey, plenty of space. So my parents-in-law, right? They have a house that is way too big just for themselves, but they grew up with like 3 kids in that house, and now all of the kids are gone. They have so much space there, and I'm just thinking like, if you had a house like this, you could just like turn one of those rooms into your gym and then purchase a Tyrex machine and don't even bother anymore about anything else.
It's like my parents. They've got like this big house that had 4 kids in. My sister's still at home, but like my dad has a garage which is bigger than this. Well, yeah, it's bigger than this room I'm in. You could easily fit the machine in there.
Totally.
So I was that's why I said if I wasn't with Charlotte, and I probably would have just moved home and like just bought one of those machines and chucked it in the garage and like, cheers, Dad.
I would love if people were to reach out to me over on Instagram and maybe have some kind of suggestions or ideas of what to do, what to further do in regards to complementing that rack. Things that I'm not thinking about, maybe because, hey, I'm just going down the rabbit hole over on Pinterest, and Pinterest is the perfect place for something like that, where you find so many things, and it's just like, holy shit, this is something that I didn't think about. This is something that I want to build. And I actually found joy in the process of building these things as well, which is pretty cool.
So you feel, so in terms of how you're feeling, do you now actually feel much better? Like, did the equipment make you feel much better?
I don't think it has something to do with the equipment.
Okay.
I know it sounds weird, but I think that it has to do that my eyes aren't as dry anymore. I'm
That'd
not
be a
kidding.
good thing, is it not?
Yeah. Because, and I think that everyone who wears contact lenses knows exactly what it is that I'm talking about. Because whenever you're wearing contact lenses and you wear them for a long period of time throughout the day, by the end of the day, when you're getting tired, your eyes are just like super dry. And that then leads to you feeling super tired. And because I think I was wearing for such a long time contact lenses, I have the connotation, so my brain has the connotation that when my eyes are dry, I am tired. And because of the surgery over the past weeks, my eyes were constantly tired or constantly dry and thus tired, because it's, of course, tiresome overall, right? And now, here over the last 1 to 1.5 weeks, they are getting better and better and not as dry anymore. And still in the morning time, it feels like, oh, holy shit, what's going on, right? I can barely open my eyes. Still like, need to yawn so that I actually produce some kind of teardrops. But yeah, now it's getting better and better. And I have the feeling, because of that, I don't have the connotation or the feeling that I'm tired.
Interesting.
Right? And I think that also plays a major role in the way that I perceive things to be at the moment. I know it sounds weird, but
it is weird because I've never done contacts. Only glasses when I was a kid. What was on my glasses? Like Winnie the Pooh or something. Winnie the Pooh glasses. Nice. Anyway, should we get to questions? Or did you have anything else?
No. I have just one more question for you, Steve. Can you stand up? Can the real Slim Shady please stand up? Yeah, I would assume that this is Goku or Vegeta. It's Goku. All right. Yeah. I was just like seeing it flickering with several different colors the entire time, and I could see the top of the hair, of course. I just wanted to see that.
I have to give a really special thank you to Russell Taylor, because I saw him, he had this company called 3 Lifts, and he would make t-shirts, and I follow him, and I saw he was like creating this t-shirt, and I was like, that is sick. And he was like, I don't produce these really anymore for sale, and maybe he will now if loads of people reach out to him. I can't remember what his handle is on Instagram, but Russell Taylor is his name, and he's in our free Facebook group quite often, commenting on things. He's been in the industry like the whole time I've been in it. I think you probably know him. If you don't know the name, you'd recognize him. I think he's worked with Alan Aragon a few times as well, and like in his research reviews. But yeah, so I have to give a thank you to him for allowing me to have one, because it's pretty sick. Like the hair's all glowy.
And if he decides to now go into production again, then use the code Steve10.
I'm awful for like Dragon Ball Z merchandise. When I see it, I'm just like, I need it all. Like if it's produced nicely, like this is a nice t-shirt. If I see a company that looks like they do good stuff, I'm just like, I'm saving that. I'm going to buy that.
So many of those anime or just like merchandise is with piss poor quality, like very awful quality. The best thing that you can do is actually create your own t-shirt. That's better than actually buying it, most of the time at least.
Have you seen, just on a quick note, Jackson Pios? I think he's creating like his own t-shirts.
I could imagine that, because they are just like often very, very cool. And I'm just like, oh, I kind of get that.
I know I don't think you've watched Super, but Black rose Goku looks insane on black t-shirts. It's like, that's fucking aesthetic.
Yeah,
so
I
anyway,
can see that. Cool. Yeah, let's go over to questions then. So heading over to Facebook this time. And of course, supporter questions first this time. As always, Andrew White. Thank you very much, Andrew, by the way. If training with proximity to failure is essentially the name of the game when it comes to hypertrophy, would it make sense to structure more movements in myo-rep fashion with 10 to 20 rep activation sets for more opportunities to train to semi-failure? My guess is no, but I'm trying to figure out why I think straight sets would be better even if volume and relative tension would be equated. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Cool. It's an interesting question because I guess this is the whole premise behind myo-reps, is that kind of Bourget, I think I say his name wrong and I feel really bad because I always pronounce it wrong, but he created myo-reps to be an efficient tool. He's very much about like getting your biggest bang per buck, and essentially that is like, when we're talking about kind of hypertrophy, often the best kind of way we have to describe that at the moment is number of hard sets. And the way that myo-reps works is that you get a lot of kind of hard sets accumulating and potentially less fatigue, potentially, I guess, through that method. But he also doesn't stand by it being the like standalone method that you use for everything. It doesn't work on a whole host of exercises. For example, I would not be doing that on a bent over row because I'd be like, my back, lower back and like other musculature would be the limiting factor rather than the actual back. But could you do it on a chest supported row? You absolutely could. Like you could take that first kind of activation set and then do these mini sets afterwards. Could you just do that versus just straight sets, and which would be better? This isn't anything that's ever been researched as far as I'm aware, like comparing a myo-rep approach. And like, I don't know, I don't even think most of the time, and I don't think Bourget says that each kind of cluster set that you do counts as much as one set, because this is I guess people who would shout that effective reps are the most important thing. They would say, oh, you're getting more effective reps this way. But that's kind of been a little bit debunked by saying, I mean, it's not like all those reps beforehand just don't count for anything. They do still create a stimulus. So that's why one of those kind of clusters that you do within the myo-rep probably doesn't count as much towards hypertrophy as a single set. So I think there's some exercises it just doesn't work well for. I think it's maybe a little bit harder to apply just generally across the board for your training. But I can't see any, like, I can see why people might use it more, especially as you're getting more advanced. You need to accumulate more volume. But I've always personally viewed it as more of a advanced tool and more of a metabolite style technique where you are building up kind of that fatigue and then you're kind of having short rest periods, normally using lighter weights. And that's more normally kind of an avenue for producing cell swelling and kind of the metabolite buildup and that sort of thing. And that doesn't seem to be the prime driver for hypertrophy, and it's probably related to mechanical tension. And like if you were to ask someone like Brad Schoenfeld, I think he feels like if there's a best bang per buck rep range, it's maybe like something like 8 to 12 because it's real heavy, but it's not super fatiguing. So you get like a really good like bang per buck. And obviously that's not super nuanced, but if you're just like to look at it like that, and I don't think my reps work within that kind of thing, but it's definitely interesting because I know like the guys at RP have been using my reps a little bit more, and it's kind of a take on using breathers. So it's kind of like rest pause, and it's kind of like cluster sets, like they all kind of end up merging into one. So on some exercises I do kind of like, for example, the belt squat that doesn't load me axially, it loads me through the hips. I will do kind of a bunch of reps until I hit about a 3 to 4 RER. I'll then take 3 breathers and I'll do an AMRAP basically until I hit my kind of target RER. And I'm just being more precise with a breather, because sometimes you take a breather at the top of a rep because you're like, oh, I just need to get my breath back and I'll go again and I can get more reps out. Or I could have just done a straight set all the way through, and as soon as I hit that rep in reserve, that's the end of the set. That's probably an easier way to go about things. You don't have to think about the breather, but for some movements, I quite like taking that breather, and that set is probably a little bit more stimulative than just a straight set without the breather. So like a hack squat, I was finding myself, I don't know if you've done this, Pascal, where you like do a bunch of reps and then you take a 3 breaths and you can go again. And if you don't standardize that, it can become a problem because you can end up, I found myself, I was like adding breathers in and I was like, holy shit, have I actually improved, or have I just added more breathers to add more clusters? So I just started standardizing it, like that's one breather, or I take two maybe in some sets. And that could look like a myo rep. You could call it a myo rep, but I'm not sure. So at least I haven't really given an answer. I just wouldn't do your whole program myo reps. It's not probably applicable to everything. And I would generally class it as more of an advanced tool and a metabolite technique.
Yeah, that was a very, very in-depth and also good answer. For me personally, it would have been the same thing where I say like, okay, metabolite buildup, and that is most of the time then becoming more of a limiting factor. And I have a hard time matching and equating the volume with straight sets to myo rep sets. And for me personally, when we are truly doing myo reps, such as Borge, for example, explains them, and having those maximum of 5 heavy breathers in between the sets, most of the time I can only do like 2 or 3 additional sets, because then you have the cutoff point of the repetitions dropping off too drastically. So personally, the way I like to use my reps is in a metabolite block, because of that metabolite buildup. And also there I have 2 cutoff points. Either once you've hit the maximum amount of drop sets, that is most of the time like I call it quit at around 5, or when you're not capable of hitting the repetition or the repetitions that you are or have prescribed for you. So let's say your activation set is like 20 repetitions and your down sets are like 5. Once you can't hit 5 repetitions anymore, so 4, then the entire exercise is over. And most of the time that is, depending on the exercise, of course, over after like 3 sets or so. So if you have those cutoff points, hey, then you can't really match what it is that you could be doing with straight sets. It's super hard, at least super hard. And then once again, it's just like, I don't know, just my gut feeling tells me that there must be a difference. And that is based on no scientific evidence or so. It's just like, once again, a gut feeling. It's the same thing as when people are now saying, due to that one scientific paper that has shown that hypertrophy is nearly the same, or basically the same, when you do lower repetitions in comparison to higher repetitions. But my gut feeling and my personal experience with higher repetition just tells me that probably over the long term, it would turn out not to be the same. But once again, that is just my gut feeling, and that is not based on any kind of scientific literature. But that's just like what I would assume. I can't see someone having the same hypertrophic outcome when he's always doing like 20 to 30 repetitions, whereas the guy who's always working in the, let's say, 5 to, or let's take your example of like 8 to 12 repetitions. I can't see that. But once again, this is just a gut feeling, and I could be completely wrong.
Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
And I think that's where I like using it as well, actually, is rather than necessarily programming a lot of 20 to 30 repetition work, I do more myo reps, because if you like doing multiple sets to try and like land in a 20 to 30 rep range, like it's just super annoying. So rather than doing that, normally it's like one activation set, which is close to that rep range, and then the rest is just rest short, so you can just get it out the way and get it done with. Because I tend to find those higher rep sets are more metabolite-like anyway. They get you more of a pump versus like the heavy stuff, which is more like disruption and more like just like feels like it's getting more muscle damage and that sort of thing versus the pump anyway. Yeah,
absolutely.
Cool.
Then let me just check whether we have a different or another supporter question. No. Then let's go over to Nikias Tomasiello. In what ways has your view on prana phases and active rest phases changed in terms of how to program them within a macro cycle, if at all? Listening to Dr. Mark's Q&A this week, I got the impression Steve prefers shorter active rest phases versus 4-week prana phases for his own training.
So this is a really cool question, because I have not necessarily changed my views. It's similar to diet breaks, in that I used to have a little bit of a tendency to just always use a diet break with a deload, virtually always as a standard approach. When people are dieting, deloading, you need your diet break, you take it. And I had a lot of success with that, as we've spoken about. So I don't want to disregard that. But since this new paper came out with Jackson, and as ever, when you are evidence-based, you want to update your approaches. And we'd been discussing things like with Jackson anyway, and he'd kind of been giving me that sign of, I'm not sure diet breaks are all that. So I started experimenting with like half diet breaks, or like just 3 days at the end of the deload. Even some people going straight through if they were they're that sort of person that struggled with coming up and coming back down. And obviously Pascal gave me a lot of reason to be a bit skeptical, because he wasn't seeing all these great results with himself and for clients. It was a bit mixed on your end, whereas I was more so like, just follow the process of taking a diet break. And that's the way I was for a while with primer phases. So like after you do like a metabolite block that you've done alongside like your standard hypertrophy, not just metabolites on their own, like you've used the kitchen sink of like different hypertrophy tools, and you've been training with high volumes for maybe like 4 months or something along those lines, 4 to 6 months. I used to have a kind of standard approach of like primer phase and then into whatever it next was, like a diet or into more hypertrophy. And I don't think that's a bad way to go at all. I still think we have decent evidence to support the use of that sort of method. But for myself, I only care about hypertrophy, like out and out bodybuilder. So like lifting heavy I'm just like, nah, it's boring. Like the primer phase for me is just like, I'm doing this because it's going to lead to better outcomes going forward. It should do, at least from our perspective. And then and for clients, some of my clients were similar. Some of them really enjoy the heavy training. They're like, oh, it's nice to just maintain for a period of time. They get a good break like that. But others, like, they're like, do I have to do this? And I'm like, well, we don't have to. But I'm going to suggest you do, because it's going to lead to superior results, at least in my perspective and from my experience. So then after having spoken to Mike, I can't remember, a while ago, he kind of introduced the idea of deload, take another like basically a back-to-back deload, like 2 weeks of deloading almost, like basically a deload, then an active recovery week, which is ultimately similar to a deload. And then get like, you kind of skip that need for a primer phase because you get the resensitization a shorter period of time. Now, again, that's all theoretical. So this is something I've been playing with more with a lot of my athletes, where I've been having them take, rather than a primer phase in those situations where we need a volume decrease because they're feeling fatigued, and we've kind of used all those tools. I've been implementing a deload, then active recovery week. And I've been very careful to ask every single one of them, especially those who have done primer phases in the past, to give me like, how's it been versus the other? And I can honestly say nothing outstanding. No one's been like, it's night and day difference or whatever. So I'm not sure where I stand by it. I've done both personally, and I like getting in and out of the active recovery phase sooner. Can I say that that's ultimately better? I don't know. Is there times where active recovery phases can be used and where a primer phase might be more applicable, where you need more time at maintenance? Possibly, especially between diets. So if you're going from like, I don't know, 8 weeks of dieting or 10 weeks of dieting, and then you kind of need to maintain because you're really struggling, then a primer phase is perfect. Maintenance volume, or like a holiday or stressful periods, all those things we spoke about in the book, actually, where we said these can be applicable. And then you can get back into that diet rather than just doing active recovery, because it's like, why do that? So yeah, I guess in a roundabout way, similar to the diet break, I've been experimenting more with active recovery phases versus primer phases, just to see if I can get that resensitization, which is ultimately what we're after from the primer phase, in a shorter time period, to just get back into the fun shit that we all want to do. I don't know about you, Pascal.
So you've talked now about why we have used the primer phase and where they are still applicable, and why, and sometimes how we recommend taking them. And it's so funny that we have come to the same outcome without actually having ever talked about it.
We haven't talked.
No, because this is exactly how I now like to do with a lot of my athletes as well. And I don't know whether this was due to perhaps one time or one episode where Mike talked about it. Maybe this is because I can't recall that I've heard him talk about that. So it could be that I've heard him talk about it, but I can't simply recall. And now it's stuck with me. And I think that we had the idea also, right? Or that it was just like a natural progression that we have done. But once again, super funny that you came to the same outcome and same conclusion, because once again, I now like to prescribe primer phases less frequently than I've done in the past. In the past, I had the same things such as you. I had kind of more of a standardized approach where I had like 3 hypertrophy blocks, 1 metabolite block, followed by a primer, and then the new macro cycle started. And now it's way more flexible and way more individualized. It's also then individualized on a primer phase, what type of person that is. Sometimes I think that people are benefiting from going through a longer period of a maintenance. And sometimes where I know, all right, they should go through a maintenance and they pushed it super hard. And from a life perspective, it may be beneficial going through a primer phase. Hey, here we go. But also there are other people, and me, myself included, I haven't done a proper primer phase in a very long time. It's more like, okay, I do a active rest period. So after a hard mesocycle, I do it the other way around. An active rest period followed by a deload. So where you are then going into train, so that you end up not being too sore for the next mesocycle, so that you are then kind of aiding a little bit of blood flow and also prepare yourself while going through the same ranges of motion, but it's more like a very, very light introductory week into the next mesocycle then. Because I think that this makes more sense to me, instead having it the other way around, that you have or completed your mesocycle, do a deload, and then after a deload where things were light already, then take a week where you're completely off. To me, it makes more sense the other way around, but maybe I'm missing some things. But once again, same thing for you. I've come to the same conclusion. I'm more so in favor for the majority of time and doing an active rest period and a deload. So this is 2 weeks where you're very much training sub-maximally, and that most of the time is enough for an individual to resensitize themselves, to reset things in regards to the motivation, the drive. The fatigue levels are most of the time already at a point where they are so low that they can go again for the next macro cycle. Does that mean that I'm not prescribing primer phases any longer? No, I still think that they have their place, especially with the things that you brought up or the times that you brought up. It's just that I'm not prescribing them as frequently as I've done in the past. And that is exactly like you said. More and more evidence comes out. And the evidence is, of course, not just supported by scientific evidence, but also anecdotal evidence. And I think that you as a coach or as an athlete, that's why it's so important to always experiment and to be open for new suggestions and listen to what other people have to say, so that you can move forward instead of just be so dogmatic about, okay, that's why I hate the statement, don't change don't change it. No, what is it again?
If it ain't broke.
Exactly. Don't fix it.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
That is one of the stupidest arguments you can make. Right? So many things work, but that doesn't mean that it's good. Right? And that's the same thing. And here we are, we've been presented with perhaps other better strategies and different scenarios. And that's why probably we came both to the same conclusion, even though that we've never talked about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so hard. I mean, obviously we have our book, so we could be like, this is our way. You have to do a primer phase. But we don't, in the book, we said this is all like, a lot of it's theoretical. It isn't like we would never say someone has to do this. It's not like hypertrophy training. Like, we very much know kind of, you have to train with a certain given amount of volume to grow. Like, you can't do one set and expect to grow at a certain level, like those sort of things. Or you have to be in a calorie deficit to lose like weight and fat. It isn't one of those that we kind of dug ourselves into a dogmatic hole there. But there's still value in it. Essentially, if there's ever a time you need extended maintenance, a primer phase can really be very beneficial. And I mean, again, the thought of an active recovery and the whole resensitization is still a little bit theoretical. I imagine there are still people that might argue that, and I'd be interested to hear what Cody Horn thinks, because I know he's done a lot of the kind of research into that sort of thing, and he was using them previously. So I don't know if, I think I may have even asked him in that podcast whether or not he thought an active recovery would have as significant a resensitization, and I think he wasn't so big on that. I'm not sure. I'd have to listen back to it. But it's interesting that you do them the other way around, because I hadn't considered that. But as soon as you said it, I was like, that sounds way more freeing, because you've just trashed yourself at the end of a meso. You need a deload or you need something. An active recovery week, that week is probably quite like, are you just like, oh yeah, just do a bit of something. And then the next week you can kind of take as an opportunity to try out new exercises for maybe the new mesocycle, and really, again, similar to a deload basically, and then get into things. I hadn't thought about structuring them that way around, because I was just like, I'm deloading and then going to a primer. So now I'm deloading and going to an active recovery. I'd never thought about the other flip-flopping them. And I can't think to why that would, I mean, the active recovery at the end of the day is so similar to a deload. So they're kind of like,
totally. But to me,
I prefer
it just
from a
made
psychological
sense
perspective.
because the thing is, once again, you trash your body. You're probably coming out of the mesocycle that was the most challenging, the hardest of them all, the highest intensity, highest amount of volume that you've been doing up to this point, right? Because this should be the last of your macro cycle. So it only makes sense that after you've trashed yourself, you are finally giving your body the rest it needs. So connective tissue, also psychological rest, etc., because all of those adaptations are probably still taking place for the next 48, 72 hours, if not even longer, right? And we all know that sensation of being in a deload, first half of the deload, we are still completely trashed. And sometimes going into the training sessions, things feel so heavy. And then we wonder, like, why are we even here? And from a psychological and physiological perspective, it just makes so much more sense to me to completely take a week off straight after the mesocycle and then do the deload. Once your motivation comes back, once the drive and the urge to go back and doing some training sessions come back, but still you are at a point where you want to take things lightly again and you're transitioning into the next macro cycle. And that is then the perfect time to go in, take things very, very lightly, play a little bit around, nothing crazy, just a little bit of blood flow, right? And that just made, to me, way more sense in doing it the other way around. When you're completely trashed, still going in, when then the next week you're feeling better, but then not training, didn't really make that much sense to me.
Yeah, I'm trying to think to why you would do it the other way, and I'm struggling to think of a reason why. Really, I can't think of any reason why you'd flip-flop it to the way I was doing it, apart from... So I can't see any problem either way, really. But
because the reason is, why are we training in a deload? To keep some of the adaptations and to aid recovery due to blood flow and other physiological mechanisms. But that would still take place in the second week as well, if not even better, right? Because the first week was completely taking away like all of the stress, getting rid of all of that stress. You're probably in a much, much better position. And then you're going in, and then you're even further enhancing your position that you're in then aiding things. And also you are now way fresher than before, while then also being able to go through those ranges of motion in a much more productive manner. I'm not saying that you're overloading, but once again, just to fall back, we all kind of know that feeling that we are going into a deload, we just feel completely trashed, and we think like, why should I even do the session now? Because everything feels super heavy, right? And if you're then having 1 week in between and you're going in, things don't feel as heavy anymore. You go in and you can just go through the ranges of motion. You get a little bit of blood flow in, get the benefits of something like the training in a deload while not being super trashed. And also you're preparing yourself for the next mesocycle so that you don't end up being super trashed due to excessive DOMs in week number 1. So to me, there are so many benefits in actually structuring it that way, whereas there are not that many benefits in the other way around, or at least that's how I interpret setting it up that way.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear what Mike has to say, actually, because I think he does it the way I described it, which I think is why I ended up going that way as well. Because just that's where it landed instead of the primer phase. And the only thing I can think off the top of my head is, by doing it that way, you've had that week of completely not similar to weight training. So is, so you've had a whole week of not like weight training, and then you're going into things, so you might be more resensitized because of that time. But it's like, that's the only slight thing that I can think of. I can't imagine.
So for me personally, it does. So that didn't really make that much sense, to be frank. But once again, this is now just like assuming why he does it certain ways. And for me personally, Mike and I are disagreeing on certain things anyway. And that is one maybe as well. But once again, I don't want to strawman things without having heard his take on the matter and why he does certain things. It's redundant to actually talk about it or make some kind of assumptions.
The most important thing I take from the active recovery is, and it's partly why we deload, right? Is each deload will probably buy you a little bit of resensitization because it's like a low volume week. So the active recovery is like an extended deload. And that's how we sometimes describe primer phases, even, because it's like a bit of an extended deload in a way, but it's harder training than a deload. So really what, like, essentially 2 deload weeks is kind of what you're after. And you could almost take a deload week off. It's not going to be a big deal. So it's almost like a week off and then a deload week. Like, so I can definitely see that. It's just basically 2 weeks of really nice low volume that's really stress-free. Yeah. That's what we're after, I think.
Absolutely.
So cool. Yeah, my one can't be flip-flopped now because I have a holiday booked in the active recovery week. So that will be an active recovery week, and I'll be going from like hiking to my first week. So yeah.
Cool. Then we're up
the
on
weekend
time
to do some lists.
So let us for the first time in a very long time actually now pick a winner for the last time. So Improvement Season 191, and we have asked why it is that people are pursuing bodybuilding or what drives them, right? So let us see who has now this time won the membership. Amount of comments, 23, and Trevor Fulbright once again. No, Valdemar Winter. By the way, love these, but try to keep lockdown corona situation out of this. And that's just something positive, of course. Yeah, I mean, it's not the what we've been asking, but of course, it's the winner. So Valdemar, feel free to reach out to one of us over on Instagram or whatever, right? And then you get access to the member side. So yeah, Steve, on what note do we want to end this here this time?
I was just thinking he probably turned off because we ended up talking about it. So he was probably like, screw these guys, they didn't listen to my comment. Damn. Probably. So he'll not get the free week. Yeah, I was trying to think, what can we ask? What did we talk about? I can only think of like what maybe when, for people who have been out of gyms, what they're most looking forward to, at least in the UK, ours are opening in like just over a week. What are you most looking forward to going back and using? Or if people in Europe, some people might be back in the gym even in Europe. I don't even know what the whole situation is. But when you do eventually get back in, what are the things you're most looking forward to?
The toilet. The smell. The smell of gym toilets.
Do our poos.
The smell of gym toilets in the morning. When someone just took their big whey protein dump. That's the best. That's the best. This is what I'm looking forward to. So on that note, I guess
I'm disgusted.
Yeah, guys, thank you very much as always for tuning in. It's so confusing because here on Zoom, we both say Steve Hall. So it's Steve Hall and I'm called Steve Hall as well. So both Steve and Steve, we really do appreciate that you always turn up and all of the support and all that kind of stuff. So, of course, if you further want to support us, hit the notification button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment in the comment section below, whether it's negative or positive. I mean, this always helps the algorithm anyway. So, yeah, very much appreciated. The love goes out to all the haters then, because once again, you help us with the algorithm. And that would be very much it for this time. So, I guess I'll speak to you guys soon, and goodbye, Steve.
Auf Wiedersehen, guys. Got to German it up. Mm-hmm.
So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge. And I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.